Most people live their lives believing that something outside of them needs to change before they are allowed to change inside. They believe that confidence must arrive after success, that belief must follow evidence, and that certainty is something that appears once life improves. This way of thinking feels logical, but it quietly keeps people waiting. The great teachers never taught waiting, they taught causation. They taught that the inner world is the cause and the outer world is the effect. Not sometimes, always. Life does not respond to effort alone. It responds to state. It responds to assumption. It responds to who you believe yourself to be when no one is watching and nothing is happening yet. This is why so many people work hard and remain in the same place. They are trying to change outcomes without changing the inner position they are operating from. They want different results while holding the same self-image, the same expectations, and the same emotional habits. You do not become confident because success arrives. Success arrives because confidence has already become familiar internally. You do not feel worthy after money appears. Money appears when worthiness is no longer debated inside you. The outer world is not designed to lead you forward. It reflects you back to yourself. Your self-image acts like a thermostat. It quietly regulates what feels acceptable, possible, and safe. Anything above that level feels uncomfortable. Anything below it feels familiar. And life will always move you back toward what feels familiar unless the internal setting changes. This is why people sabotage opportunities without realizing it. They hesitate. They delay. They overthink. They find reasons not to move forward. Not because they are lazy or incapable, but because the opportunity does not match their current identity. Readiness is not skill. It is not intelligence. It is not potential. Readiness is identity. When you identify as someone who struggles, ease feels suspicious. When you identify as someone who must fight for everything, support feels unsafe. When you identify as someone who is not yet prepared, opportunity feels like pressure instead of invitation. This is not a moral issue. It is a psychological one. People often say, "I'll believe it when I see it." But believing is not a reaction to reality. Believing is a position of consciousness, and consciousness determines what you are able to see. The mind is not a neutral observer. It filters reality. It selects what stands out. It highlights what confirms its assumptions and ignores what contradicts them. This happens automatically. Two people can live in the same environment, hear the same information, and receive the same opportunity, yet experience completely different outcomes. One recognizes the opening, the other overlooks it. One moves forward calmly, the other freezes. The difference is not luck, it is internal orientation. Alignment is often misunderstood as emotion. Many people believe alignment means feeling excited, elevated, or positive all the time. But true alignment feels quiet. It feels grounded. It feels steady. Alignment is the absence of internal conflict. When who you believe yourself to be matches what you are asking for, effort softens. You stop forcing timing. You stop chasing confirmation. You stop trying to convince yourself. This calm is not passive. It is powerful. The nervous system plays a critical role in this process. When the body perceives threat, it contracts. When it perceives safety, it opens. If success feels unsafe internally, the body will resist it, no matter how much the mind says it wants it. Becoming is the process of making the unfamiliar familiar. It is allowing the mind and body to acclimatize to a higher level of expectation, responsibility, and receiving. This is why repetition matters. Not repetition of words, but repetition of assumption. Each time you return to the idea that things work out for you, the nervous system relaxes a little more. Each time you choose calm certainty over doubt, the new identity stabilizes. This is not dramatic work. It does not come with instant fireworks. It feels subtle, ordinary, almost uneventful, and that is why most people abandon it too early. But this is where the real shift happens. When the inner state stabilizes, life responds without effort. Opportunities appear naturally. Decisions feel clearer. Movement feels less forced. You are no longer trying to become someone. You are simply being. And when being changes, receiving follows. Most people do not realize that the life they are living is not the result of what they want, but the result of what they repeatedly expect. Expectation is far more powerful than desire. Desire can be fleeting. Expectation is steady, and whatever you expect consistently becomes the framework through which you interpret your experience. This is why two people can want the same outcome with equal intensity and yet receive completely different results. One expects life to respond. The other expects disappointment, delay, or struggle, and life answers each of them accordingly. Expectation is not something you announce, it is something you carry. It is revealed through your reactions, your patience, your decisions, and the way you speak to yourself when nothing is happening yet. The great teachers spoke often about assumption, not as positive thinking, but as an inner posture. An assumption is a position you stand on mentally, and once you stand on it long enough, the world arranges itself around you. This is why becoming must come first. You cannot expect ease while assuming struggle. You cannot expect opportunity while assuming limitation. You cannot expect abundance while quietly believing that things rarely work out for you. These inner contradictions create friction, and friction is what people experience as delay. Delay is not punishment. Delay is feedback. It is life showing you that the inner state and the desired outcome are not yet in agreement. People often try to solve this by effort. They push harder. They add more strategies. They consume more information. But information does not change assumption. Effort does not change identity. Only familiarity does. The mind accepts what it repeatedly experiences as normal. This is why environment, routine, and inner dialogue matter so much. They condition what feels ordinary to you. If struggle has been normal, ease feels foreign. If stress has been normal, calm feels suspicious. If disappointment has been familiar, success can feel unreal or temporary. This is why people sabotage what they say they want. Not because they are afraid of success itself, but because success challenges what feels known. The nervous system always moves toward familiarity, even when familiarity is uncomfortable. This is one of the most important ideas to understand. Becoming is the process of gently introducing the mind and body to a new level of normal, not through force, but through exposure. You expose yourself to new assumptions the same way you would adjust to a new environment. Gradually, repeatedly, calmly. This is why imagination plays such a central role in transformation. Not as fantasy, but as rehearsal. When you repeatedly imagine yourself responding calmly to success, handling opportunity with ease, and moving through life with quiet confidence, the mind begins to accept that version of you as plausible. Once something is plausible, it becomes possible. Once it becomes possible, it becomes expected. And once it becomes expected, it begins to appear. This is not mystical. It is psychological conditioning. People often ask why affirmations do not work for them. The reason is simple. Words repeated without acceptance do not condition expectation. They remain sophist level. What conditions expectation is agreement. The moment you internally agree that something is natural for you, resistance drops. This agreement is subtle. It does not feel like excitement. It feels like neutrality, like calm acknowledgement, like quiet knowing. This is why true alignment feels uneventful. There is no emotional spike. There is no dramatic shift. There is simply less inner tension. And when inner tension dissolves, action becomes easier. Decisions become clearer. You stop hesitating at moments that once felt intimidating. This is how opportunities begin to flow. Not because you chased them, but because you stopped resisting them. The outer world always responds to this shift. Sometimes quickly, sometimes gradually, but always reliably. When the inner state changes, Life cannot remain the same. This is why patience is not passive. Patience is an active inner stance, a decision to remain aligned internally, even when the outer world has not yet caught up. Most people abandon the process here. They interpret the lack of immediate results as failure. But in reality, this is the moment where identity is stabilizing. Once identity stabilizes, outcomes follow naturally. This is why becoming is the work. Receiving is the result. Most people underestimate how deeply ingrained their inner assumptions really are. They believe a thought is something fleeting, something that passes through the mind and disappears. But assumptions are not passing thoughts. They are conclusions, and conclusions quietly govern behavior. A conclusion is something you no longer question. It becomes the lens through which you interpret everything that happens to you. If you have concluded that life is difficult, you will interpret challenges as confirmation. If you have concluded that success is rare, you will interpret opportunity as an exception rather than a pattern. This is why becoming is not an act of willpower. It is an act of revision. It is the gradual replacement of old conclusions with new ones. The great teachers spoke about this often, though they used different language. They spoke about changing the concept of self, about assuming the feeling of the wish fulfilled, about acting as though something were already true. What they were really pointing to was this process of replacing one internal conclusion with another. Until the conclusion changes, nothing else truly changes. You can want abundance and still conclude that money is stressful. You can want success and still conclude that it comes with sacrifice and exhaustion. You can want freedom and still conclude that life requires struggle. And as long as those conclusions remain intact, life will continue to reflect them back to you. This is why effort feels heavy for so many people. They are trying to move forward while carrying conclusions that pull them backward. Becoming aligned means releasing conclusions that no longer serve you and allowing new ones to take their place. But this does not happen through force. It happens through familiarity. The mind accepts what it repeatedly encounters. This is why exposure is more powerful than affirmation. When you expose yourself again and again to the idea that things can work out, that opportunities can be supportive, that progress can be steady, the mind slowly stops arguing. It does not happen in one moment. It happens through repetition without pressure. This is also why people become frustrated. They expect the inner shift to feel dramatic. They expect a moment of certainty, a surge of belief, a clear emotional signal that they have arrived. But the real shift often feels like nothing at all. It feels like neutrality, like calm, like the absence of resistance. And because there is no emotional fireworks, people assume nothing has changed. But in reality, something very important has changed. The old conclusion has weakened. When a conclusion weakens, behavior changes subtly. You hesitate less. You respond differently. You stop bracing for disappointment. You stop scanning for what might go wrong. These small shifts compound. This is how life begins to reorganize. Not suddenly, but logically. You begin to say yes where you once said no. You begin to notice openings where you once saw barriers. You begin to trust your timing instead of fighting it. This is alignment in practice. Alignment is not about forcing the mind into optimism. It is about removing internal contradictions. When you no longer argue with yourself about what is possible, energy becomes available. This energy is not excitement, it is clarity. Clarity leads to movement. Movement leads to opportunity. Opportunity leads to confirmation. And confirmation strengthens the new conclusion. This is why becoming must come before receiving. Receiving without becoming creates instability. But becoming without receiving always resolves itself in time. Life cannot remain mismatched indefinitely. When the inner state stabilizes, the outer world follows because it has no other instruction. The moment you stop asking, "When will it happen?" and start asking, What conclusion am I living from? You regain control because conclusions can be revised, and when they are, life changes without force. This is not about controlling the world. It is about aligning with it, about recognizing that the inner word always precedes the outer experience. Once you understand this, patience no longer feels like waiting. It feels like certainty without urgency. And certainty is the most magnetic state there is.